I'm going to talk a little bit about myself and my upbringing and why is it that I started to get involved in Israel advocacy. And there's a bit of a wide range because obviously I don't come from that world. So I was born and raised in Israel to a somewhat left-wing Zionist family. My mother was born in a kibbutz. My grandfather was born in Jerusalem. My grandmother was one of the founders of Dugania Aleph, which is the first kibbutz in Israel, therefore the first kibbutz in the world. My grandfather was Israel's first ambassador to South Africa and also part of the Israeli delegation to the UN. So it was something that I was raised with in my household. I think you can call it kind of like salt of the earth of Israel. We're an Air Force family, and I have photos of myself at 8 years old in a cockpit of a F-15, and but it was something that it was never doctrinated. It was just kind of, that's how we did it, like summers in Dgania by the Kinneret and the Jordan River, and it was something that was imprinted in me without being indoctrinated in me. When I was in my teens, around the age of 14, I discovered the stage. So basically, first time that I stood on stage, I realized that I feel at home, and my life turned to that particular world. I became very involved. I got my first drama scholarship from the Tel Aviv Museum of Art when I was 14 years old. When I was 16, I did a musical. It became a very big success, and that was the first time I started getting involved in producing as well, because I was doing, at 11th grade, I was both the lead of that show and also did the PR and helped producing it. So got very involved in front and behind the camera. And then I joined the Army, and after the Army, towards the end of my service, I was in what they call it Shasan, which is Shirut Sadir Nosaf, which is extra time in the military. So usually girls need to do 2 years, but then when they kind of ask you if you would please serve 6 more months, you kind of say, sure, okay, because you have to. So I was towards the end of my service, I was already given extra time, and I was offered to come do this audition for a television show, and went up to my commander and I said, all right, I know that I'm still in the Army, and I know that this is out of the ordinary, but I want to start my life, so can I go try this out? I said, yeah, sure, you can do that. And I went in and booked that show that while I was still in the service, it aired, the first 3 episodes air, and it was one of these things that overnight, we couldn't walk down the streets anymore. It was just one of those overnight success. The show is called Noa Tishby Gimel, which is somewhat like a Melrose Place, or, it's like a hyper soap opera, and I played the bitch, and, it was really fun. So it was all about my career, really all about my career. I didn't care I grew up in a very secular house. We didn't do Shabbat. We did the holidays just like every other Israeli does the holidays, but it was never in a religious context. So those years were fantastic. I was very lucky in Israel. It's a very, very small and very creative market, and I was very lucky. I've done everything from West Side Story and Habima National Theater. I put an album out. I was touring. The show was on, and it was very much focused on my career. And then in my early teens, I ran into a very smart man, a producer, who said to me the following sentence. He said, if you make watches, you got to live in Switzerland. If you make wine, you got to live in France. And if you're in show business, you got to move to LA. And I thought, awesome, I'll move to LA. So I packed my bags and came to LA, of course, not knowing that it's not that simple. LA can be a tricky place. But I came here, and very happy that I did that. Obviously, throughout the years, and I'm going to just touch very briefly on that. Daniel was so eloquently describing myself. You make me sound great. So I've been very lucky in LA. Obviously, the ups and downs, you have to kind of pay your dues here at some point. So it's, even though I came here from Israel, all going, I was in the Army, I could do this. LA taught me a lovely lesson of patience. And but throughout doing television and films and whatever, I went back into producing, which is something that I've done again since I was a kid. And was very, very, very lucky to have the opportunity to bring in treatment, and therefore to basically open the Israeli industry, the Israeli creative industry, to the Hollywood market. And it was incredible. What happened to me was that throughout my time in LA, my whole perspective about Israel and about Judaism transformed. Because again, when I moved here, I was so disconnected. But for me, it was about discovering Judaism from a whole other point of view. Because I'm sure you guys know, in Israel, it's either you're super secular and you don't give a F about religion or whatever, or you are Orthodox or conservative. There's nothing really in between like we do it here. There's nothing that is the Jewish tradition that lives very nicely with modern life. So that changed me. That was the first thing that changed me in the context of Judaism. The second thing that changed me in the context of Israel was that, again, at the beginning of my time in LA, I met a friend, a girlfriend of mine, who is an Academy Award-winning actress, making north of $10 million a film. And when we met, we started talking. She goes, "Oh, yeah, great, you're from Israel, this is fantastic." And she goes, "So how does your family feel about you?" And I go, "They feel great." What do you mean? She goes, "That you're modern and everything." And I was like, what do you mean by that? And she goes, "Well, that you don't wear all the head things." And I looked at her and I'm like, oh my God, she's confusing Israel with Afghanistan. Like, for real. And she's not, she's not a hick from nowhere. She is one of the leaders of the Hollywood community. And I was blown away. And it was the first time that it occurred to me that we have a problem, that Israel has a problem. Because if you live in Israel, it's such a modern society, and Israelis travel so much. And we have everything from biometric system to enter the country by handprints. We've had that for 15, 18 years or something, to video cell phones. I've used that 7 years ago or something in Israel. Like, it's very evolved. Israelis travel all the time. And it seems to us in Israel that the world knows we're great, right? And it's only when I moved here that I realized the gap between perception and reality of Israel, and also the lack of knowledge that the world has. Because when that friend was talking to me about this, I realized that it's not that she's an idiot. It's that we're not communicating something right. Those two events had me, it was funny because I kind of think of it as if like my upbringing and my DNA, my childhood kicked in without me even noticing it, where before I was like, man, I don't care, I'm a citizen of the world, right? Suddenly when coming under attack, it wasn't an attack, but when it was somewhat dangerous, I went, hang on a minute, I gotta do something about it. So it became gradual, and at first I was, I started to get myself involved in Israeli events and Jewish events in the community, and I would come as a guest, and then I started hosting the events, and then I was laughing because I felt like I'm becoming a mouthpiece of the Israeli. Every event that they asked me to host, I was like, great, I'll do it, whatever. Obviously the holidays and everything, and I tried to do as much as I could to educate people and to explain to them that this is not what they think, right? And the biggest change happened last year at the event of the flotilla, which I'm sure you all aware of it. It was 1:20 a.m. and I was about to go to bed, and I went on Ynet and clicked on just before I go to sleep, and I saw the headline saying 9 peace activists killed by Israeli Defense Forces. And I remember looking at the headline and I went, wait a minute, there's something that they're not telling us. This is not the military. These are not the values of the military that I served in. It's impossible that that's what happened. There's got to be a backstory to that. And I sat down and I laughed because my friend Sharon here, who's my executive director of Act for Israel, which we'll talk about in a minute, she saw me. I sat down on the internet, I sat on Twitter, and I didn't get up for about a week. And I realized that what happened was that, first of all, within 20 minutes of the story breaking, Israel was trending number 3 in Turkish on Twitter. Very bad. And the other thing was that the whole story broke on the blogosphere. And the whole story became the truth. Israeli peace activists. Now, obviously, now we know, 12 hours later, the Israeli Defense Forces released the tapes. They did an internal investigation, and they looked into what's happened, and they got the tapes of the soldiers being beaten down by the peace activists from the party in Turkey that is connected to Hamas. surprisingly enough, and also that they had reporters on the boat, and they had Al Jazeera on the boat, and they had bloggers on the boat, and they were very clear with a narrative and a story about what was occurring way before we were. So we took our time and we got the facts right, but as they say, don't confuse a good story with facts. It doesn't matter. That to me was what changed everything, because throughout that week on Twitter, I had to fight off people who were so adamant and so anti-Zionist, anti-Semitic, anti-whatever, that were very aggressively going up against us. And I realized that that war was lost completely. It's almost impossible now, even though the facts are out there, and even though everyone from Goldstone to everybody turned around and said, wait, it's not actually what happened. If you ask the average, slightly politically interested person around the world what had happened, they say, well, the IDF killed 9 peace activists. That's all they know. And I realized that it's an actual threat to the safety of Israel. That this is not just a story, and this is not just as us Israelis. When we are in Israel, we kind of go, well, we're right, so they'll figure out the facts, and it's all good. We know who we're dealing with, right? And I realized that's not the case. So a few weeks later, we found, a group of us found each other on Twitter, oddly enough. People approached me, people that came from Israel activism and from online marketing, and we decided to do something about it and to create basically a frontier of Israel advocacy and rapid response on the internet. One of the things that we found out is that, let me just see if you can guess. All right, so we checked the pro and anti sentiments for Israel on the web, worldwide. Do you want to guess what the numbers are, percentage-wise? Just somebody throw a number.
90.
90 what?
90% pro-terrorist. Arab.
90% pro-Arab. Pro-terrorist, right? You're very close. 87. 87% of all online communications is anti-Israel. Now, it was clear, I said at the beginning, I come from a somewhat left-wing family. I don't always support the government's actions. But between that and coloring everything with broad strokes of that's bad and that's apartheid, and without realizing the context of the Middle East and what kind of a neighborhood we live in, which I'm hoping now with the Arab Spring, then they're seeing what's happening around, and none of it is surprising to us Israelis, unfortunately. We knew all of this. We're like, of course Gaddafi is insane. Of course Assad is a tyrant. It wasn't surprising. You can't talk about the Middle East without talking about the layers of what's been going on there. You can't talk about the Middle East without understanding the big context. So we started Act for Israel, and we work very, very closely with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, with the IDF spokesman. We were the first organization to do this work. Nobody took on the online world, because I think that people from a certain year, that were born a certain years backwards, they still call it new media. And that's actually, it's not new media, it's the media. New media is like, just if you were born in a certain year, you'd be like, oh, all the crazy kids with the new media. Like, no, that's what we do. 83% of kids under the age of 30 in America receive their news from the social networks. So it's a passive action. They're not even going to the website of CNN or Fox or MSNBC or Times. They sit at home and whatever reached them, that's what they read. And we have not been, as a country or as activists, we haven't been actively pushing that message out. Whether it's a message about, yes, we bombed Gaza, but here's who we killed there and why, right? The news, again, the media is Israel is attacking Gaza, but they don't go back and see that there's been 110 missiles in the past 48 hours falling on Israel. So whether it's that or whether it's pushing the positive stories, people don't know how much is coming out of Israel in the context of technology and agriculture and entertainment and everything that we do for the world, Nobel Prizes and all these things that for us, again, and that every country, every big company, the Google and Apple and who else? Intel, Microsoft, they all have research and development centers in Israel. Like it's unbelievable when you look at the context of the Middle East and what's happening all around, that there's that little pearl of Information and modernism and democracy, and nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows. I'm sure you've all experienced this yourselves. So we do this work, and when I talk to people about why I do this, it's important for me also to explain the American context. Because if I'm an American and I'm not Israeli and I'm not Jewish, I don't care. And there's no reason for someone who's not from our community to understand why they should care about Israel. So I have my personal reason. I've got two reasons that I do what I do. The first one is obviously Zionism. That's how I was raised. That's me. I believe in very simply that Jews deserve a state, that the state should be in Israel, and that we have the right to be there, all right? A lot of people don't think that. That's fine. They're entitled to have their opinion, right? So a lot of people don't think Jews should have a state. I do. That's my Zionism. That's okay. That's reason number one. Reason number two, which is one of the things that I try to explain to people, and again, I think we're failing in this particular mission, is that Israel as a state, and all of us, fail to make the connection for people around the world between Hamas and Gaza, and Hezbollah in the north, and Iran, and 9/11, and bombings in Madrid and Bali and London, and all of those particular situations that are happening around the world, that the fact that there are tentacles of the same enemy. The tentacles of exactly the same war. So technically, what we need to communicate is that Israel is on the front line of a worldwide war. And the world needs to unite. The Western world that has the same values, that has that has democracy, need to unite with Israel against the extremists, because we know what we're dealing with, and we also know that if Israel ceases to exist, let's say we hand the keys over, and we go, all right, sorry about that, there you go, you can have it. We know it's not going to stop. We know it's not going to stop. It's going to continue. Israel is some sort of a barrier between West and craziness. And that's why, as a non-Israeli, non-Jewish American, or anywhere else in the Western, whether it's in Europe or in Asia or in Australia, this is why you got to stand behind this particular cause and particular mission. And we're doing the best we can to make that change. It's an uphill battle. We need a lot of resources. We need a lot of people. We need a lot of money. We need to keep doing what we're doing. I know that with what I do in producing, I was able to already, the attitude of Hollywood towards Israel is 180 degrees. It's completely different. Because where at first it was very much like, all right, you have a format from Israel, so now you say to an executive or a head of network or studio, format from Israel. They're like, great, I want to see it, I want to buy it, I want to, that there's a huge transformation. But it's important that it actually spreads out, not just for the sake of the state of Israel, but really for the sake of the values that democracy and the rest of the Western world is dealing with right now. It's a bigger problem than just Israeli problem. We're doing what we can with the little work that we're doing. And you can use all the help we can get. So get involved.